My name is Bob Zitter, and before I retired a few years ago, I was Chief Technology Officer for HBO. I remember Michael McEwen, who is the Director General of NABA, and thank you, Michael, for putting this together, had once introduced me to a woman who at the time was uh, Minister for the Arts in Canada, and we had a very hefty debate because one of the things I was involved with was one of my first rejections in life was how HBO was not going to be allowed into Canada. And we had this debate about protecting culture and things like that. So in any event, going the wrong way, and I better watch out. So I, I've worked at HBO for 33 years. I've been on the board of NABA, and for me, this topic is an important one. NABA engaged me as a consultant to work with them as they've identified what I'm going to talk about and others are going to talk about today, the need to come up with a common file format. And, and while I've been CTO of HBO, I will tell you I am nowhere near the engineer of any of the people that you're going to hear speaking today. And quite frankly, my background was business, and I had the foresight to hire some of the best engineers that I could in the United States, and to be at HBO at the time that we were really a change agent in the television industry. And one of the things that we came across, and I retired 4 years ago, so this must have been about 4 years before that. We realized we were doing on-demand television. We had a path to take us to the internet and to other platforms and to other forms of distribution. And we were looking at what we were doing. And at this time, which is about 8 years ago, I saw that we were manufacturing, if you would, about 500 program assets per month. I'm not talking about promos, I'm talking about programs. Now, in HBO's case, we didn't do 500 new programs, but they were the HD version, the SD version, the on-demand version, the international version, things like that. But we saw that that was going to be exploding and expanding, and my job was to convince my boss, our CEO, that we needed to invest some money for some technologies that really didn't exist at that time, because we saw the whole manufacturing process of television needing to change. By the time I retired 4 years ago, HBO had gone from 500 program assets per month to manufacturing 250,000 program assets per month. Now they do slightly over 300,000 program assets per month. And we all know what the reasons are for that. We have affiliates who want high-quality mezzanine format. We have all the different platforms. Thank you, Steve Jobs, that standardization has taken a big hit. So I was smart enough to hire someone away from Disney ABC who really worked on building, from the beginning, a new content pipeline, as we called it, from production all the way through to distribution to our platform partners. And we needed it. We needed to go to a highly automated workflow because there is no way that you could do this kind of increase in quantity by just throwing more people at it. And obviously everything had been and was moving to files in that time. In our case, it was before you could buy products that would manage the assets and move them through the system. So when NABA asked me to work on putting together an educational program to work on developing a brochure, hopefully you've been given one of these, and there are more if you feel there are other people who need to get the message without all the technology. And to pull together these seminars, I jumped at the opportunity because I know that it's really so important to our industry. As you'll hear, because we are all dealing with files, but metadata is something that we all know the importance of, and having to do metadata in a diversity of ways is really bad for the business. And we'll talk about why that is in a bit. Let me just tell you about NABA for those who don't know. The North American Broadcasters Association is a membership organization comprised of the national broadcasters of Canada, the United States, and Mexico. They are not just public broadcasters, they are the commercial broadcasters. So NABA, while it's like the EBU or some of these other broadcast unions, the EBU is only public broadcasters. NABA is comprised of everyone in the television chain who works nationally. You can be a full member if you're a television network or a national distributor of programming. And then we have associate and affiliate members who have businesses that support that effort. And NABA is not like the NAB. We don't hold a big convention. We're not lobbying the governments. We do represent the broadcasters' interests at the ITU, which is the treaty organization that oversees essentially all the spectrum around the world. It's part of the UN. One of the things they do pretty well. And NABA's work is, while there is a small staff, is largely done by volunteers from its members. And it's done in committees. There's a legal committee. There's a committee on operations. There's a technical committee. And the technical committee was the one that recognized that something needed to be done that wasn't happening otherwise for North America with respect to video file specifications and coming up with something to make it far more efficient. That committee was comprised of essentially all of the broadcasters from these countries, and they asked Clyde Smith, who will be speaking a little bit later, to chair a technical committee whose members came from all of the disciplines, broadcast, production, technology, services companies, to work together to try to identify and come up with what we're going to talk about today, which is common video file specifications for North America. So that's what NABA is doing and has done to get to this point. To start us off, I'd like to give a little background. And this spec that we're talking about, we call it the NABA DPP spec for a reason. There's an organization called the Digital Production Partnership in the UK. It was created by BBC, ITV, and Channel 4, and then soon Sky joined it. And they recognized that there was a need for what we're talking about today, a common file format spec in the UK. They had two things going for them. They recognized this right at the time that the tsunami wiped out the Sony videotape factory, and we all woke up to realize that Sony was pretty much the sole source of videotape for the world, and we had to deal with shortages. And the other good thing that they had going for them was that they were essentially the big gorillas in the UK, and of what it's like working without these common specifications and why we might benefit from them. Clyde's how it can be implemented in the work that you do. So I've spoken about the Digital Production Partnership from the UK. So the North American broadcasters got together through the technical committee, and they recognized that what they needed to do was come up with something that would work for us without reinventing the wheel, and to make sure that we involved all of the stakeholders who were going to have to live with this, who were living with the problems and hopefully reaping the benefits. The broadcast, the production, and the technology community. And one of the axioms that was really used in developing the specification was to adopt existing standards. Anyone who's been involved in standard setting knows that if you do it as it generally is done, it takes a long time. And if there are standards that already exist, what we can do is specify those standards that we would like to see used and specify how they'll be used. And so that's what the technical committee did. The result was to come up with a common format that would be common technically, but would provide flexibility for the differing business requirements that we have. NABA members and everyone else in the food chain are all competitors. They have different business strategies, different objectives, and you want room for that creativity to continue to flourish. And so that too was one of the axioms of the committee, to make sure that it would have the flexibility for differing business requirements and changing business requirements. So what that resulted in is what you're going to hear about today, and I submit that it's going to provide benefits for broadcasters, for producers, for production houses, for people who make the technology or provide the technical services that we all use. And it's going to do it by providing lower costs than we would without it. And you're going to hear specifically why, not just me saying it. It's going to make the whole workflow more efficient. Now, I work for a guy, the CEO of our company at HBO, who never wanted to hear in a budget meeting that we spend this money and it's going to get us more efficiency. And he said, show me where that comes down to the bottom line. Okay, and what you're going to see is how this more efficient workflow really does translate to the bottom line, wherever you are in this business. In a major overview, it's really simplifying the workflow, and you'll see how that is. But really easily, it's coming up with fewer versions than you need to do otherwise. A very, very important benefit is in the quality control area. You'll hear about some experiences they've had in the UK, but at the end of the day, you will be able to, we all will be able to, decrease rejections of content through the workflow, minimize the number of repairs and the reorders that are needed. All of that saves time and money. And most importantly, in this world where if you've been a broadcaster, a capital B broadcaster, or as I like to always say to the NABA folks, a lowercase b, because HBO never had a terrestrial broadcast license, but we still are pretty profitable. What we all have to be doing is increasing our workflow volume because we are no longer wedded to one form of distribution. I think everyone is in the business, as we used to say at HBO, that we don't care how they watch it, where they watch it, when they watch it. We just want them to watch our programming. And that means more platforms and increased workflow volume. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And one thing that I did want to mention was that when the NABA board decided to move in this direction and spend the effort that has been expended, we started asking broadcasters to adopt this specification, but to do so at a time that works for their refresh, their technology refresh plans. We know that however great this is, you're not going to throw out some technology or workflow prematurely. But, as you'll see later on, they all have life cycles, and you need to plan. In most cases, I know when we did ours, I had a budget cycle that was 18 months before implementation, and implementation of many things, and certainly this workflow, took a year. So what we want you to leave here today with is an understanding that, that what we're asking people to do is to plan to do this and put it in your planning as you look at your technology refresh. And if you manufacture equipment or technology, you're going to need to have that technology for the broadcasters, the producers, and the post houses to implement during their time schedule. So far, the NABA DPP format has been officially adopted by PBS in the United States, Fox, CBS, and in Canada by CBC. I will tell you that there are a number of others that are very close to announcing their commitments to do so.